Hello again, fellow songwriters. Dan Colbert back with you for the second episode of my series, A Songwriter's Notes on Songwriting, where my intention is to share with you some things I've learned over the years as I've progressed in my songwriting skills, in the hope that they may help you to succeed a little bit quicker than you might otherwise in your songwriting. I have no interest in pushing you towards or away from any style or even any process in your songwriting. We all have to discover our own of both. Instead, my hope is that at least some of what I have to share with you will be food for thought that feeds your process. This series is also different from others on songwriting that I've come across in that it's not in any way prescriptive, at least it's not meant to be, as most of the other ones seem to be. So I hope you enjoyed the first installment of this series. Today's will be much shorter than that first one. I apologize for going a little longer than I had planned, since I won't be repeating all the introductory stuff. Last time we discussed how staying kind of close to home, that is to the tonic chord in the circle of fifths, which you see here to this side of my head, and I'll keep up the whole time I'm talking for your reference. Um, if you stay close to the tonic chord in the circle of fifths, you'll keep things sounding kind of maximally harmonious, okay? Pleasant to the ear, not jarring, not dissonant, things like that. You can live a whole life of songwriting in just one quadrant of the circle of fifths. And a quadrant, again, kind of three of those wedges, okay? The middle outer one would be the key, major key that you're in, if you're in a major key, or the middle inner one would be the minor key that you're in. You can live a whole life of songwriting just by staying within any given quadrant, okay? It doesn't matter what the key is. And many famous songwriters have done just that. And I hope you have had a chance to noodle around with chords within one quadrant since last week. And again, mixing up these six chords, the two to the left and right of the tonic on the inside and outer rings, those six chords, um, in different orders, can already provide you with an infinite array of songs, okay? And again, just to remind you of the nomenclature here, the one chord is your tonic chord, so it's the chord that corresponds to the key that you're in. Let's say we're in the key of C major, so you'd look at the C on the outer ring, and the 5 chord is the G that's just clockwise to that immediately, and the 4 chord is the F that is the first one counterclockwise. And then you have the 3 relative minors of each of those, okay? A minor, D minor, and uh, E minor, okay? And if you're anything like me, and most songwriters, you'll want to go beyond those 6 basic chords and explore past that kind of harmonic horizon. And recall, just as a reminder, I talked about the word harmony last time. We're not using the word harmony here in the sense of singing harmony like Crosby, Stills, and Nash, okay? But really to denote the foundational chord structure of your song, the chord progression, okay, of your song. And that's where, and we talked about last time starting either with a chord progression, the harmony of the song, or with lyrics. Both work. I've done both, and we'll talk about starting with lyrics later on in this series. But right now, if you do start with a chord progression, that sort of establishes the foundation of your song. Now, there are 2 ways of going beyond the little home wedge or quadrant that I've been talking about, those 6 chords. Two basic ways of doing that, and they can be combined together and routinely are very nicely. The first one is the subject of today's talk, which is to incorporate chords into your progression from outside the quadrant. Okay. The other way of kind of going beyond the basic six chords is to go beyond triad chords. A triad is the basic chord structure of, for a major chord, it would be the tonic or root note. In a C major chord, that would be C, and then either a major or minor third, and a perfect fifth above that. So in a C major chord consists of a C, E, and G. C minor chord just flattens the third, so it would be C, E flat, G, okay, and so on. So those are the basic triads. And if we add other notes, either from within the scale of the key that we're in, or even outside it, we can kind of spice up the sound of the chords and therefore the music overall. And we'll talk about that next time. It's a pretty big subject. I may even need two talks for that. But again, today we're going to just talk about, let's just think in terms of the basic triads, but incorporating chords into your chord progression, into your song that lie outside the kind of home basic quadrant we've been talking about and outside those six chords. Now, I've been using kind of this cooking metaphor a little bit since I'm a cook. It's natural for me talking about spicing up or adding flavor to your chord progressions. And these two ways that I've been talking about that I just described fit nicely into that metaphor. If we talk about adding chords outside the quadrant, analogously to adding additional ingredients to, say, your stew that you're cooking. Whereas the second type, going beyond triads, adding notes to the chords, is a little, to me, like adding spices. So that's, hopefully that's a little bit of a useful metaphor for you. We'll talk about spices next week. Right now, what do I mean by adding ingredients? So let's suppose we're making a stew, say beef stew, okay? And for you vegetarians out there, substitute tofu or tempeh or your favorite protein for the beef. Anyway, your main ingredients might be beef or whatever protein, onions, carrots, celery, potatoes, and tomatoes, let's just say. Okay, those are sort of the main ingredients in your stew. So, and hopefully you noticed as I was counting on my fingers, there were six of those. I chose six purposefully, six main ingredients to correspond to the six basic chords in our circle of fifths quadrant. Okay. Now, will it still be good without, say, potatoes in there? Sure, mix it up. I mean, again, not all, even basic songs use all six of those chords. In fact, there's lots and lots of great songs that use just three of those chords. There's even a few great songs that use just two chords. So within the quadrant. So, again, you can decrease the number of ingredients, but today mostly we're going to be talking about, if not increasing them, at least picking ingredients that lie outside that quadrant in the circle of fifths, okay? So what if we add another veggie to our stew, say green beans? That might be a slight surprise for whoever you're cooking for, okay? Or you could go a little more exotic still and substitute leeks for the onions, or fennel root, or pick your vegetable or ingredient, okay? You get the idea. So building the harmony, the chord progression of your song is really a lot like cooking, okay? The aim of it is to end up with an integrated, satisfying taste and feel to your dish, just as you're aiming to do with your song, of course, not a taste, but something pleasing and interesting to the ear, okay? So let's get a little more concrete and look at some examples. If you're in the key of C major, say, again, the 6 basic chords are C major, F major, G major. Those are the 1, 4, and 5 chords. And A minor, D minor, and E minor, they're relative minor chords of these 3 major chords respectively. Okay, and again, you can see them in the circle of fifths here. If you were to include in your chord progression somewhere, say, a D major chord or an F minor chord in your key of C progression, you're stepping outside that home quadrant, as you can see from the chart. This won't sound quite as harmonious, kind of by definition, as staying in the quadrant. But who said we should be harmonious all the time, right? It's important, and I can't emphasize this point enough, it's really important to surprise the listener's ear once in a while. Otherwise, the music can start to sound stale, okay? And just as a kind of big example, a big part, in my opinion, and I'm not the only one, of the Beatles' songwriting success came from doing just that, to kind of surprise the ear with a chord, an unexpected chord that lies outside the basic quadrant, okay? Now, another band that has really done a lot with this idea is, and one of my favorites is Pink Floyd. And their biggest hits tend to be very simple harmonically, okay? But they also like to add those extra ingredients by stepping outside the quadrant, and they do that quite a bit. One example of doing this is the chorus of Comfortably Numb, okay? Now, the chorus of Comfortably Numb starts out in the key of D major. The verses are in B minor, which is simply the relative minor of D major. So it's all pretty close to home again. Anyway, the 1, 4, and 5 chords of D major are simply D, G, and A, okay, as you can see from the chart. And the chorus starts out squarely in this space. I'll just play a tiny bit for you and then we'll talk more. There is no place you are receding, a distant ship smoke on the horizon. So that's just D and A, okay? 1 to 5. Extremely common as there is anything in popular music, okay? So you're about as close to home as it's possible to be with more than one chord, okay? But then they do something interesting. They go to a C major chord, and I'll play it in a moment, but I want you to notice that C is not part of the D major quadrant, right? It lies outside of that. Now, when they go to the C, they then kind of shift and mimic the same 1-5-1-5 pattern of the first part of the chorus. So they go C, G, C, G. That's 1-5-1-5 in the key of C. But we started out in the key of D. So you could call this, it would be fair to call this a modulation to the key of C from the key of D major, if you want, or just temporarily stepping outside of the home quadrant of D major, okay? And then, and I'll play it in a second, then it repeats these two parts, the D part and the C part, before it strongly reclaims the original key of D major by shifting back to A, then passing through C one last time before going back to the home of D major. So let me play the whole chorus for you now, and I think you'll see what I'm talking about. There is no place you are receding, A distant ship smoke on the horizon. You are only coming through in waves. C and G. Your lips move, but I can't hear what you're saying. When I was a child, I caught a fleeting glimpse, that's DNA, out of the corner of my eye. Not a C. I turned to look, but it was gone. Can't explain, you would not understand. The child is grown, dream is gone. Here's A. I have become comfortably numb. Okay? And then you're off into David Gilmour's soaring solo. Okay? And you know, many of us have heard that 1,000 times, so it doesn't sound all that spicy or disharmonious, but you know, it brings in a little bit of that. It kind of mildly steps away from home and just brings in some interesting new flavors that aren't going to be there if you stay within the home quadrant. Okay, so that's kind of a simple and mild example of how you can step away. Okay, so I also do this in my own songs, and it can be especially effective. By the way, I have to bring up my songs. It's a funny thing about songwriting, and I've heard other songwriters say this. You know, Comfortably Numb, I've heard 1,000 times or more in my life. My own songs, I have not heard that many times. I played them a lot, but I haven't heard that many times, so I don't have them all memorized as well. Anyway, it's just an interesting thing, so I have to bring it up here on my screen to remember the words, especially. The music is easier. Anyway, getting back to this song, Human Highway, which I'll use to illustrate this point. Stepping outside of the home quadrant can be especially nice and interesting to do for a bridge, and I'm sure later on I'll have a whole episode talking about bridge writing. And this can introduce a little bit of a harmonic tension to the song before you resolve back to the original key, okay? And so one example I have of this is, again, my song Human Highway. And again, there are videos of all my songs on my channel, so you can check the whole song out there. And please subscribe to my channel. I appreciate it. Both the verse and the chorus in this song stay perfectly within the home quadrant of C major, okay? Although, again, it replaces the 4 chord, which would be F major, with its relative minor, D minor, okay? Otherwise, it's really squarely in, well, it is squarely in that quadrant, okay? When I go to the bridge, though, I suddenly go to a B flat major chord, and then to an A7. We'll talk about sevenths next week, so don't worry that it's an A7 rather than an A. The point is that neither of these chords is part of the home quadrant of C major, as you can see in the circle of fifths. B flat is right next door to F, so it's not very far away. Remember last time I said sort of the further away you get from the quadrant, the more dissonant and disharmonious it'll sound. Okay, so the B flat is sort of the nearest outside neighbor to your home quadrant. Okay, But the A major chord is actually 2 steps away, as you can see from the chart, from G. Okay, so this is a shift that's even a little bit beyond what we discussed with Pink Floyd's song, since there's not really a modulation. A major is on the opposite side of the circle of fifths from B flat major, for example. So they're not really related to one another. But somehow, I hope you'll agree, it works for the ear. And when I say it works, that it's quite subjective, of course. But basically, what I mean is that it's not offending the ear. Okay, and then I resolve back to D minor and G major. Okay. And I'll try to call out some of these chords as I'm playing. I'm not gonna play the whole song. I'm gonna play the last verse and then go to the bridge and then into the chorus, and you'll hear kind of how this all works together. Okay, so let me just get this up here, and we'll be ready to go. D minor to C. Now your tank is running dry. There's no place to fill up inside. So you stay fixed in your lane, holding it tight. 'Cause you know, yes you know, you're in the right. Find a fellow traveler, pick up a passenger, take comfort in riding with her. Oh, it's a long, slow decline. On the human highway, and it's hard to find your way home. The solid lines painted on the human highway keep you safe, but you're still riding low. Okay, well, that's not quite the end of the song, but hopefully you get the idea. So again, both during that verse and the chorus, I was just, with D minor, C, G. Okay, that's basically it. So again, really strongly in that, if you like, D minor, C quadrant or A minor quadrant. And I'm sorry, there is an A minor thrown in there as well. So we have the chords D minor, C, A minor, and G. Okay? So we're very strongly in that quadrant, okay? As strong as you can ever be. And then I get to the bridge. La, la, la. La, 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 la. Back to D minor. La, G, la. Okay? Then back to the chorus. Right? So to the tonic. So the chorus is really in C major. So it might not be that intuitive to you that these chords will work. Again, they're not, well, one of them is close and one of them is not quite as close. They're not terribly far away from the home quadrant. By the way, let me illustrate one other thing using this song. When I wrote that, last time I talked about how important it is to fool around with your instrument, okay? Just discover things. Just put your fingers down somewhere and find and listen to the sounds that come out of it. And over time, the more you do that, and the more you play your songs or other people's songs, the more your ear develops. So, what I'm about to say is not. I don't intend it as any bragging, but just to illustrate how your ear develops. I had the verse and the chorus by that point, and I was thinking about putting in a bridge. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. So I just had finished a verse, and my fingers just went to B flat major. Now, there's no intellect, as I said last time, I'm not thinking about chords, and I'm not thinking about the circle of fifths. I'm not thinking about all this stuff while I'm writing or fooling around. But there's something that had developed in my ear that made my fingers go down in that place. And then right away, I mean, without thinking about it, they just went to the A7. So my point is, trust in how much you're going to be getting out of the ear development. You don't need a lot of technique for this. You need to develop your ear. Your ear will guide your fingers, believe it or not, in where to go. Now, this is sort of an extreme example. Sometimes I have to try various things, or sometimes I'll struggle with it. But this does happen, and it's an important part of songwriting, in my opinion. One other song that I just quickly want to illustrate this idea of quadrant is, again, another one of my songs called Weeping Willow Road. This is a pretty simple song with a main 4-bar, 4-chord progression to it. So let me play that right now, and then we'll talk about it, okay? And the chords are just A minor, G, F, and E, okay? So again, if you look at the chart and sort of replace the A minor with a C, it looks like we're in C major, okay, in that quadrant anyway. So you'll see the E doesn't belong there. Whoops, let me start again. F, here's E. A minor, G, F, E, okay? That E does shake things up, right? There might be another progression might just go A minor, G, F, back to G. I'll do that once more. Maybe I should have played that first. You see kind of how, you hear how harmonious that is, going back to the G, right? I'm sure I've written songs with that progression in it, maybe in a different key, and lots of songs have been written with those 4 chords, okay? A minor, G, F, and G, okay? Very common, very close to home. But then we're just kind of twisting things up a little bit by replacing that last G with the E major chord, which again, as you can see from the circle of fifths, is outside the quadrant here. You know, that's just, again, one of our special added ingredients. And doing that E in this key of C is pretty typical of that kind of Western cowboy sound, if you like. Again, it surprises the ear just a little bit. It's nothing very dramatic. Just as maybe adding fennel root to your stew might surprise your palate a little bit, okay? So I'm going to leave it there today. Just a reminder that I have posted videos of all my original songs that I refer to here. Hope that you check them out at your leisure afterwards. And again, please subscribe to my channel. So just in summary for today, I hope I've gotten across that stepping outside that home quadrant by adding chords that are outside it to your chord progression is one way to add kind of a different flavor to your song. And as a cook, I like to think of this as adding unexpected ingredients to your dish. And as we continue in the series, I'll point out other examples where I or other songwriters have stepped outside of the home quadrant in that way as we come across them. Spices, what I call spices, where we add notes to the basic major and minor triads, are a different category though. Okay, and this is what I'll talk about next time. So until then, stay in tune.